Hey guys, your boy MKS again, back with part 2 of this video, of this thought of mine. Overall, I love to support India financially, possibly more, I think more than any other country in the world. In fact, certainly more than any country in the world financially and economically. But I thought I'd want, out of a strange habit of mine, I thought I would hear love to hear the converse side of the arguments, like some of the negative stereotypes about India, and I hope I'm not inviting trouble here or inviting sort of arguments or negative feedback or anything like that, but I hope it'll be a civil discussion. Come to think of it, probably naive of me to think so, but like about people who might hate or even dislike India, which I would disagree with. Disagree with hate anyway. But overall, I'd love to support India. But again, I thought I'd hear from the adverse side of the argument. So I thought I'd get on with my list. As I say, because it's the 13th, I thought I'd go with the negative list because of my strange patterns and superstitions and things like that. And normally I sort of mock superstition, but yeah, I have my own superstition about number 13 and things like that. And I was thinking of writing up a story today about my fears about flying, some of my imaginations, but I haven't yet quite got around to it, so I hope I will later on. So I'll certainly think about it and try and write it either today or either tonight or ASAP really. Anywho, I say I'll crack on with the list anyway because I don't want this video to be too long. But point number 11, I'd say, I think, like for me, I'm more of a fan of creativity, which to me looks towards the future. And I think India is quite is a country that is quite academic but also cultural. And to me, academia or culture is sort of living in the past. And I know I talked about. I don't think you should have to respect someone just because they're older than you. And I think the elderly people should lead by example. So there are things that I disagree with or dislike about India, and the reason why I wish to support India financially is not necessarily because I think it's the most ethical, but because I think they were robbed and things like that. And I still think their rightful position was as the richest country, because I'm sure if the resources weren't taken out of the country, they would probably be the richest country in the world. And so overall, I'd still support them, but there are things that I disagree with, like the cultural stuff, which to me is like, as I say, living in the past, or just because your ancestry did something. I don't think that's a good reason to do something. So might be a quirky reason, but yeah, so that's another reason. 12, as a lot like human rights abuses or animal, like violence against animals, which I talked about before, I think is quite hypocritical. As I say, people with learning disabilities or who think differently, and especially in the past were beaten in class. Although I suppose you could say that about most countries, like even the UK, they had the cane if you didn't do well at school. They thought you were playing up, so perhaps it is a bit harsh reason, but it is a reason nevertheless. 13. I am clutching at straws a bit, but I have these habits of trying to make 13-point lists, which perhaps I shouldn't do. But yeah, I think that there are lots of negatives, as I say, like the treatment of the poor and other communities. And I'd love to hear other people's opinion, as I say, about reasons why they would perhaps not support India. Though I hope people will overall. Yeah, and I'd love to hear about, as I say, some of the negative things people think about India. Like, do people think it's a stereotype, I suppose, that apparently it's supposed to be like quite dirty and smelly and things like that, and have a lot of pollution. So I don't know if that's a good reason not to support India. I'd say overall I would still support India, and perhaps I should have saved my more positive video till later. But I thought, as I say, I keep mentioning sorry, but I thought I could also cover some of the negative sides of India as well. So that's 14. 15. Again, like treatment of women and girls, females of all ages. Like apparently, like girls when they're very young are kicked out of the house and things like that. Again, people with learning disabilities, Dalits who have to clean toilets, and people who are really poor and have to eat rats for a living and things like that. I think there's a lot of harsh treatment of those groups. And although I think in some ways India is probably freer than other countries, I think there's also a lot of violations of freedom, as I would put it. Like you have to follow certain family rules or cultures or things like that. And there's like things about honor and probably a lot of honor killing and things like that. So there are things I disagree with, I would say, about India, if I'm honest, which personally my way of life would be different. 16, yeah, I think that Indians can be like quite academic, but also they look down at people who are not so academic, or who are not. Also, perhaps they look down on people who don't earn as much money as well. I'm not sure if I mentioned that point. 17, again, I think like differences, people are different. I think there's not much tolerance for people who are different a lot of time in India. Like I say, neurodiverse people with autism or dyslexia or ADHD. And maybe those things need, like if those things changed, I perhaps want to support India even more. If I did support India financially, I'd want to make sure I supported especially people from neurodiverse backgrounds or females of all ages and things like that. 18, I think also Indians can be a bit, have some negative character about looking down on other people, or there's a lot of prejudice, Hindu nationalism, a lot of violence and things like that, which I disagree with, which I know I've mentioned, but that kind of thing. 19, also, I think if you support India or give them aid, I think you'd have to make sure it goes to the right place. I think there's a lot of corruption, and there's no guarantee that the money will go to the poor people. 20, and I would love to hear both sides of the argument, like what people, I know there have been videos already about what people like and dislike about India. So perhaps I'd share some of those in the link in the future. In the comment section below. So anyway, I hope this video wasn't too bad. I hope I didn't offend anyone with my opinions. I'll say overall, I still would wish to support India financially. I still think it would be a better thing to do, or an ethical thing to do. But I did want to hear, hopefully as politely as possible, I did want to hear the converse side of the arguments, like what people think is negative about India as well. I think that covers part 2. I can't think of too many other things. I know it's quite difficult to share your opinion because you can always offend someone out there. But I'd say overall, I would still support India. But I did want to say some of the things I disagree with about India. As I say, like I'm not really, although I believe in God, I'm not really a traditionalist person. So I'm never really wanting to be a provider or stuff like that. Yeah, and I certainly wouldn't want to marry someone because my parents wanted me to and things like that. So I'm glad my mum's not like a traditionalist. So if I was brought up in a traditional Indian household, I think it would be quite, partly because I've got learning disabilities and I think differently and all that, and partly because I I wouldn't want to have to listen to my parents all the time. I like to be more of a free spirit. Anyway, I think I'm going to wrap this video up, and I'd love to hear your comments. Sorry if I was waffling. Sorry if it's not as good as I want it to be, but gave it my best shot. So hopefully someone out there, even if they love India, will still kind of see some points in this video or understand some of the points. And of course, people are free to disagree. Hopefully the comments won't be too negative or hateful. Peace and love.